Harlem. Before I went to Harlem, I was in the Army for 3 years to make money for college. And I went to Baruch College, which is part of the City University of New York system. And I got my master's and PhD at Binghamton University, upstate New York, in Binghamton, New York. And I teach creative writing at Howard University. I was invited to teach here. I was the first ever tenure track creative writing professor, and I'm a full professor now. So I have a long trajectory. And the reason why I wrote I Am Alfonso Jones is probably one of your questions. Why did you write that book? Was because of the the endless assaults against people of color by, police across the country, and the killings and the lack of justice. And it just seemed, because of the advent of social media and the advent of iPhones or, cell phone cameras, that these incidents were able to be documented, even though they've been going on for so long. I wanted to tell the story about a teenage kid from the Bronx and Harlem who's the victim of this. And he tells a story from the position of being killed by the police from the point of view of a spirit, an ancestor. So I kind of put a lot of stuff in it, and I'd rather expound upon all that stuff with the questions that you guys are going to ask. But while I was writing that book, I also was working on other books that were kind of related. And I would like to share some pieces from you. But before that, just to get a sense of who I am, some of you may have, I'm not sure, you may have, when you were younger, had books of mine, maybe in your library or in school or whatever. But in terms of children's books, this is one of my first ones. It's called Deshaun Days. It's about a 10-year-old kid named Deshaun Williams from the projects, talking about his life through poetry. And, I was raised in the Throsnick housing projects in the Bronx. So I kind of drew from that. Then I did a biography in verse, in poetry, about the great African-American poet Langston Hughes, called Love to Langston. A book called Christmas Makes Me Think. This came out right after Deshaun Days, and it's about a middle-class kid who, basically has everything he wants or whatever, but when he starts to see homeless people and how they struggle and don't have, he wants to do something about it. I did a biography of the great Bob Marley called I, Bob Marley. People always mistake the title for called I, but it's really I, Bob Marley. They just try to be fancy with the cover. It's about the great musician Bob Marley, who is also very revolutionary and an activist, and one of my heroes like Langston Hughes. I also have a poem that deals with a real life story about my grandmother, who when I encountered a homeless woman on my way to school, I was going to high school in Manhattan, Norman Thomas High School. I encountered this woman at the train station, Pelham Bay Station, underneath the L, and she was cursing everybody out, whatever. And she was laying out on the cardboard. When I came back from school, she was still there, but she was sleeping on the ground. It was cold. It was wintertime. I went home, and I asked my grandmother if I could, what could I do to help her? My grandmother gave me her coat, and I brought the coat for her and draped it over her. The next morning, she was smiling, all happy. And it's in this book called Love to My Mom. So that's the short of it. You probably have seen these in the library, hopefully. But right now, what I'm going to do is, because I want to give you a lot of time to ask questions, I'm going to start to read a couple of pieces that I wrote around the same time as the I I Am Alfonso Jones book was either being written or it came out already. And they deal with issues that are similar to the issues that are being brought up by in I Am Alfonso Jones. And I'll read a couple of excerpts from I Am Alfonso Jones, and then we will open up the floor for you guys to ask questions. You ask them in the chat room. Michelle Weissman, our great leader, will select you guys, and then you'll be able to speak the questions out loud to me, and then we'll have a dialogue. Because we only have an hour, all right? And I'm in a suburb of Washington, D.C. called Hyattsville, even though I am from the Bronx, the boogie down in Harlem. So the first piece I want to read is from this book called We Resist, We Rise, We Resist, We Raise Our Voices, by edited by Wade Hudson and Cheryl Hudson. They both were publishers of mine, and they did this important book. And this is what the piece looks like. It's a story. And the story was inspired by something that I saw in the news that took place in New York City. I think it took place in Harlem, actually. And I was so affected by it that I said to myself, I have to write about that. I didn't write it exactly at the moment that it occurred, but I put it in the back of my head. And when the time was right, I wrote it. And I wrote it for this book particularly. It's called One Day Papi Drove Me to School. And it's illustrated by Edel Rodriguez. And it's beautiful illustrations, powerful. Okay. One day, Papi drove me to school like he always does, talking about my homework, science, history, and math. He made a funny face when I told him all I had to add. Lots of kids were in front of the building and others were being dropped off. I turned to Papi to ask him, will you pick me up after school? And before I knew it, 4 cops came running toward him. I heard a commotion. I looked to my right and screamed, Papi, Papi. I saw my Papi go down on the ground, tackled and shackled and hands cuffed behind his back. I could not see Papi's face. The cop with his knee on Papi's back smashed it into the pavement as he grabbed a fistful of Papi's hair. All I could see were Papi's jeans and his construction boots. I screamed. The world started to sweep from beneath my feet and buildings started to tumble, and I nearly had an asthma attack from my constant screams. One cop, a woman with the word ICE on her back, pulled me by my waist as I flailed and kicked in desperation. Students, parents, and some teachers crowded around us as the officers held me to the ground. My Papi was pushed into a police van. La migra, someone yelled. Others laughed with their fat fish faces, taunting me with alien and illegal and get out and go back to your country. I shouted, this is my country, you stupid doofus heads. Before I knew it, a crowd of white kids surrounded me, but other kids, black and brown and some white, came to my rescue. Somehow, though, I was the one who was taken to the principal's office. 2, now the school was split in half. A crazy group of kids wore Make America Great Again hats just to taunt us. But others, black, brown, and white kids, were down with us and not racism. In all my 9 years on the planet, I never had a fight, but a handful of kids wanted to start trouble. One day, they scrunched up their faces and balled up their fists. We stepped forward in unison. We took off our jackets and our sweaters and dropped them to the ground. Then we stuck out our chests real proud so they could see our t-shirts that read, I am not an alien. I am favorite song, Get Out My Lane, No More Borders, No War. Police found that day and moved on classrooms. The next day, the Make America Great hats had disappeared. Instead, some kids asked, where can I get the cool t-shirts? We didn't get any more glares or stares. One of the boys who bullied me even came up to me and said, my mom's a lawyer. She can help your dad. And as we walked to our class, he turned to me, guess what? I said, what? I'm just like you. I gave him the side eye and answered back, a girl? He laughed and I laughed. And then he said, my father's from Croatia. 4. That would make the perfect ending for a movie, but this is real life. And they took my papi away. And once again, the world was swept from under my feet, and mommy's, she has to find a new job to help take care of us and help get papi back. One day, my papi drove me to school, a day I'll never forget. I get sad and scared when I think about where papi is. I keep his photo in the gold locket he gave me last Christmas. I keep it pressed tight and close to my heart. And so that story was written when I saw this incident where a girl, I think she was like about 13 years old, her father was driving her to school, and she was in the back of the car when he got out, and then the police arrested him right in front of the school. And the girl was just like hysterical and screaming and crying. And it was heavy duty stuff that I really was moved by. I just wanted to story, imagining how it would be from the point of view of the child. So that became that. Another piece I want to share with you is from this book called 13 Ways of Looking at a Black Boy. I was working this book while at the time working on Am Alfonso Jones. And the reason why I really dig this is because I wanted to show the depiction of people of color where we don't have to always announce to the world, and particularly in our own country, that we're human. We're just as human as everybody else. I just wanted to show it. And so I kind of do that in these 13 Tanka poems illustrated by all these various artists, 13 artists. But I specifically wanted to show it in the introduction, which is a poem unto itself. And this is it. 13 Ways, an introduction. Black boys scrape their knees, they bleed. Black boys cry and scream, they tackle life like air gliding on wind, basking in the breeze. Black boys sit beneath trees, inhale fresh cut grass and dream. Black boys play with building blocks, are fascinated by clocks, cradle skateboards under their arms. Black boys love basketball and books, toss footballs and leaf through pages lost in stories and myths. Black boys love comic books and superheroes, are heroes to little sisters and brothers. Black boys love popcorn and watching movies, love their grandmas and grandpas. Black boys hug and kiss their moms and emulate their dads. Black boys wear their daddy's shoes and ties, smear shaving cream on their smooth faces, giggly in steamy mirrors. Black boys shine bright in sunlight, build snowmen and have snowball fights. Black boys study the stars, looking through telescopes, lie on their backs in tall grass, staring at the blanket of blue sky, at all the eyes smiling and twinkling down on them. Black boys like to hum and drum, Bebop, hip hop, like to dance and sing, jazz and scream. Black boys are 3 dimensions of beauty. Black boys go to church, ride buses, go to school, sit on stoops, fly kite, shoot hoops. Black boys like to sit in their quiet and think about things. Black boys are made of flesh, not clay. Black boys have bones and blood and feelings. Black boys have minds that thrive with ideas like bees around the hive. Black boys are alive with wonder and possibility, with hopes and dreams. Black boys be bouquets of tonka, bunched up like flowers. They be paint blotched into a myriad of colors across the canvases of our hearts. We celebrate their preciousness and creativity. We cherish their lives. And so that leads us into I Am Alfonso Jones. Alfonso Jones, as some of you may know from reading the book, is a six-year-old kid who was born in the Bronx and raised in Harlem. And he was born into some rough situation, which I don't want to really give away too much because maybe some of you haven't read it. But he ends up going, because of his mom's hard work and struggling to get him into a really great school like you guys go to, he goes to this really talented school for smart kids, talented kids, you know, kids that are interested in doing a lot of different things. And it's called Henry Dumas Academy of Arts. And his father is behind bars. And I can tell you this because it happens in the first 20 pages. His father's behind bars for a crime he did not commit. And he happens to get exonerated through DNA. Finally, the science catches up with the times. And so his father's allowed to get out. And once he finds out about that, he's very excited and he wants to buy a new suit. His only suit, his first suit, basically, for his father's release from prison. And in the process of that, he goes there with his best friend, Danetta, who he secretly has a crush on. And in that process is killed by a security guard who also happens to be a police officer, who's moonlighting. Moonlighting means when you have a job already, but you're working another job. And so in that process, Alfonso Jones becomes an ancestor, a spirit, and he's telling about his life. And so we don't have that much time, but I want to read a couple of excerpts from here to get you, a little bit of the flow and the flavor of it from the author. And so this first piece is just when their social studies teacher, who's also their drama teacher, gets into an accident. And so they have a new teacher, a younger teacher, who's an Asian American teacher who happens to be very political. And he's going to be their new drama teacher. And they're supposed to be doing, William Shakespeare's Hamlet, which is a really interesting play. It's like a ghost story, basically. And this Alfonso Jones is a ghost story. But he wants to let the kids, freestyle and do their own hip hop version of it, right? So Alfonso Jones and his friend and rival, Pedro Delgado, AKA Punky, just start to freestyle after class. And this is the famous soliloquy that Hamlet does that says, to be or not, to be or not to be. To be or not to hip hop, to be or not to hip hop. Are you noble? Will I scold you if you took my life and caused strife? What is a life? What is a lie? When your dis-ease causes another to die, blow, blow, making them toast, making them ghosts, making them host their own to be or not. And Hamlet is a story about Prince Hamlet, whose father, King Hamlet, is killed by not only his wife, but his brother. And so Hamlet is trying to find out who did it and why, and avenge his father's death. And so his father comes to him as a ghost and tells him who did it, who did what. So in I Am Alfonso Jones, if you have read it, and if you're going to read it, know that there's a lot of foreshadowing. What is foreshadowing? Foreshadowing is just a slick way for the author to, or the playwright, to slip in a little bit of breadcrumbs to let you know that something is going to happen soon. Now, fast forward to now, we know who's going to be playing what characters or whatever. And so Donetta escorts Alfonso to this Midtown Manhattan department store to buy his suit. He wants the girl's opinion because women and girls usually have, good ideas in terms of what's fashionable, right? Plus, it makes them bond and get closer together, right? Because he secretly has a crush on her. So they're on their way to Marksman's department store. And, he took his bike, but they took the train, and they're walking in the snow. It's a snow day. School was canceled, blah, blah, blah. And so they're kind of riffing, improvising their lines from the play. And so Alfonso, he wants to play Hamlet. So in this, he's Hamlet. He loses out Hamlet to Punky, his rival, but so far he's Hamlet. And Donetta is Hamlet's girlfriend, Ophelia. And Hamlet is going, he's preoccupied with his father's killing a lot of stuff. And so he doesn't have time for Ophelia. And so he wants to break up with her, and she's having a hard time. And there's a famous line called "Get ye to a nunnery," like, go to the nut house or something like that. And so it plays itself out in this exchange. Chapter 9, first suit. Ophelia, this is Alfonso's Hamlet starting off. Ophelia, I feel ya, but you don't want to mess with me. My heart is lazy. My head is crazy for what my moms did to my pops. And then Ophelia says, I don't know why you tripping, ham hock. You not the only one my heart clocks. It's not that, baby love. I just don't want you to get burnt by the fire of my desire. You need to join a choir, love. Get you to a nunnery. Hambo, have you heard? I'm hip to your lame games and trifling ways. So if you can't be my love host, you best be like your pops. Ghost. And that's the scene that leads into Alfonso Jones going to the department store, trying on the first suit, and then you know what happens after that. The last excerpt I want to read is from Alfonso Jones's mother, and it's in a chapter 35, Born to Trauma. Now, a lot of times when a person is killed by the police, the incident is played 24/7 in the media, on the news, and of course it's laid out all over social media. And so the mother is reacting to that because she's compounded with so much hardship related to her own son's death or killing, and the lack of justice, but also the spectacle of it all. They turn it into a circus almost, the media, the frenzy of it. And so it's called Born to Trauma because Alfonso Jones himself was born through trauma, which you will find out when you read it. And this is Alfonso Jones's mom, Cynthia Carmona. He was my miracle boy, the one who almost didn't make it. Every time he left the house, I prayed. You don't know what a mother goes through. Dreamt I ripped that cop's eyes out, screamed and swung and scratched his face, and woke in a sweat screaming, "What have you done? What have you done? What have you done to my beautiful baby boy?" I'm not going to let you turn my son's death into a reality show episode. Every few weeks, every so many months, another Black body at the hands of white police, Black police, any old police. Here you come again, trying to parade us around TV to cry on cue, cry out for a justice we never get. We're not going to let you make a circus of our pain. Our Black misery is not for your white amusement. Why do you think I fought to get my son into Henry Dumas? Because it was a school that was created by grassroots organizing and did not depend upon a curriculum that excluded his reality. Had that damn security guard cop officer went to a school whose books reflected a broader reality than his narrow lily white mind, had movies, TV, whatever reflected that, maybe he would have seen my son as a teenager, as a person, as a citizen, as an American, as a human, and not something so easily, so rapidly, so wistfully disposed of. His girlfriend said he shot my baby like a deer, like a deer. And all he was doing was buying his first suit. All he was doing was trying on a damn suit. I guess you got what you wanted. And the last thing I want to say to you about I Am Alfonso Jones is that the character himself, when I was thinking about him and creating him, is sort of a composite of various people who have been killed by the police. And in addition to that, also Langston Hughes at the age of 16. And let me explain real quickly what that means. He's a combination. A composite is when you create a character and you take different aspects of their story or their experiences and you put them together into this other character. And so Trayvon Martin comes to mind. With Trayvon Martin, Donetta is like his friend Rachel, who was on the phone with him when he was getting killed. And also Trayvon Martin was demonized during the trial and also in the news media. They demonize means when they start talking negatively about you and they just focus on negativity. And with Alfonso's case, you know, somebody talks about him smoking a cigarette or whatever. Like, you know, they take one little thing about you and they just blow it up and make that represent you, you know. That's called demonizing. Michael Brown, he was killed in Ferguson and he was laid out in the hot sun for hours upon hours. In Alfonso Jones, Alfonso, of course, is shot through the revolving doors of the department store and he's laid out in the snow in the winter for hours upon hours. So that aspect is there. And then there was a brother named John Crawford who was killed because I think he was at a Walmart, if I'm not mistaken. I think it was a Walmart. And he picked up a BB gun and was trying it out. And somebody thought it was a real gun, and then he was shot and killed. And so that happens to Alfonso Jones with regard to the coat hanger. Langston Hughes, lastly, is because at the age of 16, when Langston Hughes was in high school, he was totally, you know, he comes from a very broken up family and hardship and all that stuff. But once he was in high school, he was very much settled, even though he was living away from his mom by himself in the attic of his friend's house, but he was very much thriving fully in school. And so I wanted to create a character like Alfonso Jones, who was kind of untouchable in the sense that he was fully thriving. He had so much talent. He's had so much potential, but yet he gets killed. So they couldn't even demonize him when they wanted to. So I got all my points in, all my pieces. So now I open up the floor to you guys.
All right. Thank you so much, Tony. I see that Albero de Muscia has a question. Leo's going to unmute him to ask his question. Are you ready, Albero?
Yeah.
All right. Please ask Tony.
So when you were reading a piece about the Black Boy book, was when you were saying that that Black Boy could do this or Black Boy could do that, were you trying to say that Black boys can do anything that white boys can do?
In a sense, I was really saying that just like any other child, they're all related. You know, there is a documentary called Babies, which is really fabulous. And they take 4 babies that are born and they follow them up until they're like toddlers or whatever. And they're from different parts of the world. And it just shows you, you know, in a human sense, how similar everybody is, you know, going through experiences of growing up and the emotionality involved and sibling rivalry and all this stuff. And there's really no difference. The only difference is culture and language and stuff like that. So when I was saying all that stuff about the Black boys, I was trying to show, you know, like Black boys in the beginning, I said, Black boys scrape their knees, they bleed. Yeah, they actually bleed like human beings. So I'm saying that Black boys are like any other boys, or, you know, when I say Black, I mean brown as well, like any other boys in the world. So there's no difference. The human experience is universal, meaning that everybody on the planet goes through the same experiences. You may have a different language, you may have a different culture, a different religious belief system, or what have you. It's all similar experiences. That's what ties us all together. Does that make sense?
Thank you, Tony.
That's what I was getting at.
We've got a lot of questions. Andrew Gabriel Guarchado, would you like to ask your question to Tony? We'd love to see your face. So if you could show your face and unmute, you could really ask it. You could have the frame and ask the question directly. Andrew Gabriel Guarchado, you're on. Speak up.
Do all your books lead to another book?
I didn't hear that one.
I think I saw that he wrote, do all your books lead into another book? Like, does one book lead into the next?
That's a heavy question. Not so much directly, but in a sense, thematically, you know, subject matter wise. But I am going to have, and I just got the word the other day, there's going to be, what can I say? A spin-off of I Am Alfonso Jones coming.
Oh.
They're going to be having to write soon. And it's going to focus on Punky and Donetta. So that one one book leads directly into the other. In a sense, my books are connected to one another because of the type of subjects and the themes that I explore, if that makes any sense. Usually they talk about writers and how a writer is always working on one major project and all their books or whatever lead up to that one project. So in a sense, they are connected like that, but not directly, unless you're doing a series like, you know. So I Am Alfonso Jones will have a direct connective tissue in the next graphic novel.
Can't wait to read it. Now there's a question from Madeline Johnson. Madeline, you ready to ask your question? Madeline Johnson.
Where is she?
My
Can
question.
they
My question.
into the mic so I can, yeah.
Yeah. My question was, why do you think Black people get bullied and not white people?
Say it again. What did she say?
Madeline asked, why do you think colored people are bullied more than white people? And why not white people getting bullied? That's what she wrote in the chat. Madeline, pipe in if I didn't get it right.
No, you were right.
Well, actually, you do have white people being the victims of police brutality and things of that nature, but it's just not as broadcast as much. But you get that more so with people of color, and it has to do with racism. Racism is not just individuals and their attitudes toward things. It's kind of like embedded in all of the institutions, and it's a direct line from slavery and after slavery to now. So hopefully one day in the future we'll get rid of racism, but it's going to be a struggle for people to do that. Most people really want to get along and live together in harmony, but there's always that segment that makes it harder, and they feel threatened by other people, the outsiders. And a lot of it has to do with, oh, they're going to take our jobs, or they're going to do this, or they're going to ruin our neighborhoods. And that's because they don't really know people. And they're, once you start to begin to know people, that's why when you heard the soliloquy from Cynthia Carmona, Alfonso Jones's mom, she was talking about, the officer and saying, had Officer Whitson been exposed to three-dimensional depictions of Black life and brown life and the realities of such, he would be more sensitive to that, because he would know that, oh, we're all universal, we're all the same, and blah, blah, blah. There would be no fear there. So it's the absence of knowledge and this whole, fear that develops in people's minds that causes a lot of these problems. So yeah, everybody gets bullied, but people of color in this country, because of racism, get bullied more. So, and that's why we have to fight against that.
Thank you, Tony. And Antonis Felix asked a question in the chat. Antonis, are you ready to ask your question to Tony?
Sure.
You're on.
My question is, who is your inspiration? And have you met your inspiration?
Well, when I was a kid, I didn't really like to read. I was mostly into TV and movies and stuff. So my initial inspirations were like actors and TV stars, movie stars, things of that nature. It wasn't until a friend of mine named Troy Ward used to push these books on me, and I started to gravitate towards books and read, that writers became my inspiration. So, people like James Baldwin, Langston Hughes, and just a whole Kurt Vonnegut Jr., a whole host of people became my inspiration, because, the more you read, the more inspiration you get. So in any field, in any art form, whatever you want to do, just, immerse yourself in that. And just like a jazz musician, they only get better when they listen to all these other jazz musicians and try to emulate them and play like that. So my inspirations are other poets, other writers, filmmakers, people who write graphic novels and comics. I'm always in search of inspiration. It doesn't matter how old or whatever. I get inspired by my students at times. So, you don't have to have one inspiration only. You can have like, a myriad of them. And you can always, because as you grow, you're always changing and growing. You can have more than one. You have many.
Have you met any of your inspirations?
I have. And I just wrote about one, Miguel Agrin, who just passed away at the age of 79. And he was a Puerto Rican poet who created a venue called the New Rican Poets Cafe down in the Lower East Side in New York City. And it's a major institution and a major influence in poetry. And I just wrote about him on Facebook, about his passing and about my relationship to him and my connection to him and all the other artists I was connected to around that time.
Tony,
So
there's
he's
another,
important.
there's another question from Samuel Nina. If he could unmute and ask his question really loudly.
Stephen
Samuel,
Brett.
are you ready?
I have a cousin named Stephen Brett. Where's Samuel?
Looking at Samuel's icon, I don't know if his microphone's working today. Samuel, is your microphone on? Oh, here we go. Samuel, can you ask your question?
What question? Sorry.
Well, you asked a beautiful question in the chat.
What was it?
Well, I
What
can
was your
say it, but why don't you?
How did he feel when he was writing this beautiful art?
That's a great question. Thank you. Tony, you got that?
I'm gonna keep watching.
Okay, this is the thing, right? Samuel. Well, I was, I never wrote a graphic novel before, so I had to teach myself how to do it, right? So, I signed a contract without knowing how to do it. Then I had to like do all this research and really kind of like what they call hit the ground running. Like when you jump out of an airplane with a parachute, you hit the ground running. So I felt a little nervous. I felt excited. And as the process went along, I felt better and better. Once I saw all the components, because it's like a team effort. It's not just me alone. You know what I mean? I'm writing the story, but then you have the artist, the inker, the letterer, the person who puts the letters in and stuff. So these are all, and then, the editor and stuff giving me feedback. So once everything started to come together, I felt really, really more confident. But there was a point where I really didn't feel confident and I didn't even want to read my draft. I didn't want to read my own thing because I was so scared that it was going to be whack that I was like, oh my God. But I had to do it because I had to, put in my corrections so they can make the corrections. So it's like a roller coaster of emotions when you're writing or creating a project that sometimes you feel good about it, sometimes you don't, but you kind of have to struggle and fight your way through it. Does that make any sense?
Well, this is a related question. I'd like Principal Lev to pop on and ask his question.
Okay, thank you, Michelle. I appreciate it. And Mr. Medina, thank you so much for being with us today. This is always super exciting. I saw Noel Santos on as well. Thank you so much for making this book available to all of our students. And I'm a little bit like Samuel. I wrote that question a few minutes ago and now I sort of forgot what I asked. I'm sorry, I'm scrolling back up to see what I wrote.
Well, me too. I'd rather you ask it.
Okay. I apologize. For those of us that are writing, which I think is all of us at this point, what advice do you have for us as writers or aspiring writers?
I love that question because it's the easiest one for me to answer. And the only advice I have is that just with regard to myself, I was inspired to write from reading. When I was in middle school, I went to Junior High School 101 on Bruckner Boulevard in the Bronx, in Throsneck. Like I said before, I wasn't surrounded by books in my household. I except for my grandmother, she was like one of the few readers I had. And I was supposed to do a book report. I didn't do the book report because I was lazy. My mind was already shaped towards watching TV and movies and stuff. And so I got an F. And it just so happens that half the class failed. They either did a lousy job or they didn't do it like me. So the principal came down on our teacher, Mr. De Los Reyes, who was our favorite teacher. He was our English teacher. And so he came down on us, meaning he scolded us and told us, look, this is what happened. and I'm going to give you one last shot at doing this thing. Of course, I didn't want to get in trouble, and I didn't want to let down my grandmother who was raising me, my father's mother. And so I went to the library and selected a book that was on the list that he gave us, and he handed out for the second time. And there was a book called Flowers for Algernon by Danielle Keyes. I took it out. I went home that afternoon, that evening or whatever. And I started reading it that Friday night. And I could not put it down until Sunday night when I finished it, and I had to bust out that book report. I was so excited about it. I wrote it turned out I wrote a great book report, and I got an A+ because I also drew a cover art. So it was Danielle Keyes's Flowers for Algernon that really inspired me and made me want to be a writer. So that's how I got my inspiration, and that's how I said, I want to be like that. I want to create a whole world using words and things like that. I just had this little epiphany and revelation alone in my room in Co-op City. And that's how I got started. Does that answer your question, Mr. Lev? So yeah, I mean, it was a teacher. It was also a librarian, because let me tell you something. The library was a place that me and my friends went to. We used to go to the library to hang out and escape the cold in the winter and get some air conditioning in the summer. But we didn't really take out books and stuff like that. And I didn't even know how to use the library card catalog system. The librarian taught me. So it was a teacher, a librarian, that started me on my way to my life as a writer, basically. And the writers, of course.
Thank you, Tony. I see there's another question by Dariani Cruz. Dariani, you want to unmute and ask the question?
Sure. My question was that as you were writing your book, have you experienced any writer's block, and if so, how did you deal with it?
When I was writing this book, I didn't, because I had to write a proposal first. So what the proposal is that you're saying, okay, this is what I propose to write, and this is the story. And then you lay out the whole plot. And in this one, I wrote, who the characters were, the time it takes place, what the story's about, and all the plot points. So I didn't so much have writer's block, but I had to figure out how to tell the story, how to set up the scenes, what kind of dialogue was going to happen. So I just read a lot of different comics and graphic novels. I also went to the movies a lot. And every time I was watching either a movie or something on TV, I was always watching it with the eye of someone who is studying and trying to get ideas and trying to get inspiration. So once you start a story, you kind of get obsessed with the characters, and the characters start to come to life, and they live in your imagination, in your head, literally, and they start talking, and you have to kind of write down what they say and the ideas that you have. And so with the plot laid out, point for point, I was able, and all these things that I was writing down in notes, I was able to start writing. So I really didn't have any writer's block. It was more so like finding the time to write, because I was also teaching all these classes and stuff like that. So I had to kind of manipulate my schedule and force myself to write. Because sometimes you can get very lazy, but when you have a contract hanging over you, you don't get lazy. It's like when you have certain things due in school, those deadlines, they kind of motivate you out of your laziness. But you just get obsessed with the story. And that's all you think about when you're ironing, when you're doing the dishes, when you're cleaning. Once you do that, then you're good to go. But reading and feeding yourself and listening to music and viewing art, there's no way to get blocked. Just keep feeding your imagination and things will come out naturally. Just be prepared with a note and pad.
Tony, I think we have time for at least one more question. This one from Susanna Miguel. Susanna, you want to ask your question? Susanna, you ready?
I hear a little type.
So my question, wait.
Mommy, don't stop.
You had a good question.
I forgot my question, so I need to go back.
Read the whole off the top of your head.
I forgot. So I think I found it, and it says that do you tend to daydream a lot because of all those writing ideas that you have in your brain? Because sometimes that happens to me a lot. And it's hard to control at times. So
Yeah. Yeah, daydreaming is important. Everybody daydreams, but an artist daydreams kind of on purpose. And when you daydream, you just got to be ready to write it down. You can't remember everything off the top of your head. Just always have a note, a pen and a paper handy, like a notepad or something. Don't rely on your devices to keep everything, because you can lose those things. And if you're keeping a journal, make sure to type everything out and save it, because sometimes people lose their journals and it's the worst thing ever. It's like, oh my God. So yeah, daydreaming is the best thing. Everybody daydreams, but artists daydream, and they use their daydreams and they make it happen. They make something happen with it. They don't just let it go by. And they're regular dreams too, because you could wake up. I've woken up with stories, poems, everything. Scenes laid out. And like in Alfonso Jones, a lot of the story takes place on this weird train in Harlem, where the spirits of all these people that got killed, live. And it's an actual train and people get on and off. I swear, I just don't know how that came to me, but that idea just came out of nowhere and I just ran with it. And people keep asking, well, what's the rhyme or reason behind that? And I just don't know. It was just something that was fed to me from the powers. And the muse is basically the powers. You gotta kind of like when you're gardening or anything, you gotta set the stage for your brain to work. Your brain is always working, but you gotta train it to kind of focus in on something. And that's whatever you are trying to do or achieve, whether it's your schoolwork, whether it's a school play that you're acting in, or whether it's something that you're writing. Once your mind gets set on something, you start thinking about it. And the great Toni Morrison, they used to say, well, do you have writer's block? And she said, no, I don't believe in writer's block, because if I'm thinking about the story, I consider that to be writing itself. So thinking is akin to creating. You just have to be able to write down stuff so that you don't forget.
Thank you so much,
I feel like
Tony.
I take a long time to say something.
Thank you for those wonderful questions in the chat, students. I wish we had another period to answer every single question. Those were really fantastic. I think we're going to wrap it up now. Everyone's going to log off. And for the Racial Justice Club, we're going to come back in about 5 minutes, maybe 3 minutes. See you in 3 minutes, everyone. Thank you so much. Thank you, Tony.
Wait, can I say my question, please?
Thank you,
Yes,
students.
do it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Can
Go
I say
ahead.
my question?
Oh, bye, guys.
Diego, go ahead.
So if some people get bullied because of the skin color, wouldn't that cause war between the races?
Again?
If some people get bullied because of the skin color, wouldn't that cause war between the race?
Sometimes, but most people don't want war, so
Yeah.
not believing about something.
Bye.
And
Bye. Have a nice
We'll
day.
see you all in 2 minutes.
Bye.
Can I ask my question?
Go ahead.
Do you ever think about like the Black murders when writing about your books? Like Emmett Till, like Eric Gardner and George Floyd?
Yeah, because in that story, there's a lot of people that have been killed. And then we even have a page where it's kind of like the Vietnam Memorial, where they list all the people who died in the Vietnam War in the back of the book. When you get your copy, you're going to see. So yeah, I'm thinking about all that.
There's gonna be a lot of names.
It's all related.
I have a question.
There's a lot of things.
I have a
It's
question.
already outdated, sadly. Yes.
When you like publish your book, do you ever worry that people won't like it, or is it like whatever for
I don't
you?
really worry about that too much. I worry about trying to do the best book I can, tell the best story I can. I worry about my writing. I worry about, like if I could really do this, and I don't want it to be, lame or terrible. So I'm more worried about my own part of it. It's not how people are going to respond to it. Does that make
I have a question.
sense?
Guys, we're gonna have to cut the meeting off because we're moving into lunch right
Yes.
now. I love the enthusiasm from everyone. The Racial Justice Club is going to be rejoining this same Zoom in a few minutes to have some more time with Mr. Medina. But feel free to say goodbye. Feel free to unmute your mic and clap it up and thank Mr. Medina for joining us today.
Are we gonna save the chat so I can read them?
I can try to do that. It might be beyond my technical abilities, but I will try to do that.
I guess you could I think in the chat thing you just save it. I can't do it on my end for some reason. Only when I'm teaching a class.
I will definitely try to do that. Okay, I'm closing the meeting for everyone. Thank you for joining us and the Racial Justice
Bye,
Club.
guys. Maybe we could meet up again after you read the book.
Bye.